Hello, welcome to eBritish IELTS. So today we are going to talk about the marking scheme of the speaking module of your IELTS exam. Now the speaking module, like all the other modules, carries 9 bands, and it is very essential to score a higher band score in this so that you can get an overall higher band. So the speaking module, or the speaking test as you call it, is usually lasts for about 11 to 14 minutes and not more than that. It's a particularly very short speaking session that you have with the examiner, and it usually occurs about 2 to 3 days before your listening, reading and writing exam, or about 2 to 3 or even 4 days after your LRW exam. So it becomes all the more essential that you score a higher band in the speaking module. So now the speaking module is actually divided into 3 parts. The first is the introduction, the second is the cue card, and third is the follow-ups. So the introduction part of it is where you wholly and solely talk about yourself. So you introduce yourself to the examiner as soon as you walk into the cabin. You talk about yourself, you greet the examiner, and then you tell him or her your name, where you're from, where do you live, what do you do, what is your profession, or what is that you're studying. You talk about your hobbies or interests or any other relevant information that the examiner must know. So you have to keep your introduction very crisp and concise. Do not make it too long, do not overshare stuff. Just talk about whatever is very essential for the examiner to basically know you as a person. The second part is the cue card. Now the cue card is where you have to talk at length. The cue card is for 2 minutes. You will be given a very general topic and you will be given some cue questions with it. You will be given 1 minute to prepare for it, not more than that. And you're also allowed to carry a pencil and a paper along with you in that cabin. So make full use of that. Try to make concise notes. Do your best shorthand thing that you can do over there. Make prompts so that when you actually start speaking, you have those prompts, you have those cues, and then you just thread those prompts all together into a very cohesive story. So that's the cue card part, which is the second part. And the third part is the follow-up questions. Now these follow-up questions are related to the cue card, but that does not mean that you have to speak the same content that you spoke in the cue card. It can be anything. It can be your points of view, your ideologies, whatever you think. Now a lot of times what happens is that the examiner asks you questions that you might not have come across in your personal life. So in that case, you just have to cook up something, you just have to make sort of a story from general ideas and speak about it. So it's very simple to do, it's not very easy, you just need a little bit practice and you'll be good to go. Now coming to the marking scheme, how are you marked in the speaking module? So the first is fluency and coherency. This is how well are you able to speak without taking any thinking pauses, without taking any gaps, and without using a lot of fillers in your speech. Now what are fillers? Fillers are words that you use to cover up gaps or empty spaces while you're talking. So a lot of people have the habit of using a certain words, for example, like, or just simply they stammer a lot. For example, if there's a sentence that I have to speak and the sentence is, English is a global language. If I use a lot of fillers, it will sound something like, English is, it's a global language. So the word is getting repeated again and again, and these are called fillers. So they just disrupt the overall flow of your language. They disrupt the fluency of your language. Another point in coherence is how well you connect your sentences, how well do you understand the topic that you're being asked on, and how relevant are your points and ideas. So make sure that you do not deviate from the topic, and your fluency and coherency is very good so that you can achieve full marks in this. The second part is lexical resources. Now lexical resources is nothing but vocabulary. Vocabulary is a very essential part of both your writing and your speaking modules. Now here, make sure that you do not use very ostentatious or very fancy words. If you're very sure of the word and you know where it is to be used appropriately, and if you're very confident about it, then by all means go ahead and use it. But even if you have even a slightest doubt in mind and you're not unsure about the correct and the appropriate usage of that word, just avoid it. Instead of that, use simple words that make a lasting impression, because using fancy words in the incorrect places will just not make a very good impression, and it would just look bad. The third is grammar and accuracy. Again, very important. If your grammar is not on point, if you're not using grammar accurately, then obviously all your sentences and whatever you're talking about won't make sense. It will just be jumbled words that you'll be throwing out on the examiner, and nothing is going to make sense. Nothing will be coherent or fluent. So all 8 parts of your grammar, that is your verbs, tenses, nouns, prepositions, pronouns, not punctuations, your verbs, adverbs, adjectives, tenses, all these have to be very accurate. You have to use them accurately, and this is only going to come if you practice more, if your bases are all clear. So go through grammar once before you start practicing or preparing for your IELTS exam, and you will be able to do very well in this part. The fourth is pronunciation. Now, pronunciation is basically how well do you enunciate separate words, how clear do you speak them. A lot of people make this mistake of make mistakes in pronunciation because of something called MTI. MTI is the mother tongue influence. That means speaking the English language in a very heavy Hindi, a Punjabi, or maybe a South Indian accent. So you have also, another point here is that you don't have to pretend to have an accent. Whatever neutral Indian accent you have, just speak in that. Do not pretend to have a British accent or an American accent. It just does not sound very natural, and it's very easy for the examiner to point it out that you're faking it. So keep a very neutral Indian accent, pronounce words very clearly, enunciate whole syllables separately. For example, a very commonly mispronounced word is photography. Now, a lot of people pronounce it as photography, which is wrong. They're just 2 syllables, photo and graphy, photography. So make sure you don't make these kind of mistakes, and having a better pronunciation is always linked to having better fluency. Another very important point here is having a good body language and maintaining proper eye contact with the examiner throughout your speaking session. So body language is a great way of making a great first impression on the examiner. It exuberates confidence. It shows how confident you are. So even if you're speaking something wrong, or if you're speaking something irrelevant, but you're doing that confidently, the chances are high that the examiner might ignore it because you look very confident. So that's another point to keep in mind. So I hope all these 4 points are clear as to how you're marked in your speaking module, and you keep these points in mind while preparing for your IELTS exam. Thank you.